There's a number I'm about to show you that could ruin the next 30 minutes for you. And maybe a lot more than that. Maybe hours of your day, every single day. This is the actual analytics for this channel. Less than 20% of people who watch ever go looking for our videos. That means roughly 8 out of 10 of you. And statistically, that probably includes you, didn't search for this. You didn't type in a question, you didn't go looking for an answer. You didn't wake up and decide, today, I want to think about free will. Something else decided that for you. An algorithm that has been watching everything you do on this platform, tracking you across the rest of the internet, learning your likes, your dislikes, your interests, even reading your mood off of the way you scroll. And after all of that, it calculated that this, specifically, was the video that would keep you here. So, answer me honestly. When you clicked on this, or on anything else that you watched today, was that a clear, conscious, deliberate choice? Or did you just click because it was the next interesting thing sitting in your feed? There's a quiet assumption most of us carry without ever examining it, that we are in control of our own attention. That every video, every scroll, every click is something that we chose for ourselves. But what if the machine got there first? What if free will, the thing that you're using right now to trust your own judgment, to believe you're in control of this exact moment, has already been switched off? Not stolen in one dramatic act, just worn away. Recommendation after recommendation after recommendation, quietly, without alarm, without objection, and without you ever noticing it was gone. Before we talk about losing our free will, we need to first agree on what we're losing. Free will is the ability to have conscious control over your decisions. It's the sense that you could choose between one outcome and its consequences, or another. You could have had cereal this morning, but instead you chose eggs, because on some level, you decided that eggs were better for you today. That decision, however small, felt like it was yours. That feeling is the entire foundation of everything life and our society is built on. Unfortunately, it's not a very strong foundation. In 1814, a scholar by the name of Pierre Laplace published a thought experiment of causal determination. The idea that every particle in the universe has measurable interactions with every other particle, and that these interactions determine all future outcomes. In his words, quote, "We may regard the present state of the universe as the effect of its past and the cause of its future. An intellect which at a certain moment would know all forces that set nature in motion, and all positions of all items of which nature is composed, if this intellect were also vast enough to submit these data to analysis, it would embrace a single formula, the movements of the greatest bodies of the universe and those of the tiniest atom. For such an intellect, nothing would be uncertain, and the future, just like the past, could be present before its eyes." End quote. Put simply, Laplace's theory, which later came to be known as Laplace's Superman or Laplace's demon, claimed that if an intelligent observer was able to know the position and motion of all particles in the universe at any given point in time, then that observer, that demon, would be able to predict with perfect accuracy the future location and motion of everything in the universe. That demon would know the future as well as it knows the past and the present. This wasn't just a thought experiment about planets and physics. It was a direct argument against the idea of self-determination. If our thoughts are made up of material neurons and electrical charges, then under this theory, the choices we make are the result of these interactions and have nothing to do with free will. Baruch Spinoza fielded a similar argument from a more philosophical point of view. Spinoza analyzed cause and effect and came to the conclusion that every action is wholly affected by the actions that came before it. Because of this causal chain, no action is on its own good or evil. It's just a reaction to events that came previously. And he didn't waste any time in applying that theory to human behavior. He argued that if all actions are wholly composed of reactions to past events, then free will, as we experience it, must be an illusion. Spinoza didn't argue for the measurability of all the cosmos like Laplace. He expressed determinism in a more personal way. If our personalities are determined entirely by the events in our lives, then the drives that we have are wholly the results of those events. Our experience of free will, in Spinoza's view, is a consequence of being a smaller part of the greater whole of creation. How you take action in a given situation is a result of every other action, past and present, and not independent decision-making. If that is the case, then who we are, what we do, and everything, down to which shoe you put on first in the morning, has nothing to do with you having free will, and everything to do with the cosmic butterfly effect. Modern science has done a lot to demystify the nature of free will as well. John Dylan Haynes, having been inspired by a previous study by Benjamin Libet, tested participants in a duel between them and a computer. You'd be hooked up to electrodes that would detect activity in your outer cortex, the part of your brain most responsible for conscious thought. In Libet's study, people's brain activity surged in the moments right before they made the conscious decision to press a button. Now, Haynes took this a step further and built an actual duel between you and the machine. So picture it. You're wired up to sensors reading your brain activity in real time, sitting with your foot resting near a pedal. Your only job is to press it whenever you decide to. The computer's job is to stop you. It's watching your readiness potential, that early spike of brain activity that shows up before you've consciously made the decision to move. And the moment it sees that spike, it throws up a signal telling you to freeze. Now here's the part that should worry you. Most of the time, it worked. The machine could catch the decision before you even knew you were about to make it, and you couldn't stop your foot in time. But not always. There's a narrow window, sometimes only a fraction of a second, where you can still say no, where the decision has already started forming somewhere beneath your awareness, and you can still reach it and kill it before it becomes real. Researchers call this the point of no return, because past it, there's no vetoing anything. The movement happens whether you want to or not. So which is it? Are you in control or are you not? The uncomfortable answer is both, and neither. Your brain begins acting before you know you've decided anything. That part is settled. But somewhere in that gap between the first spark and the final movement, something that still deserves to be called you gets one last vote. A narrow one, a closing one, but a real one. And that's a stranger, more disturbing idea than simply being a puppet. It means you're not fully in control, and you're not powerless either. You're something in between, a flicker of agency operating on a deadline that you can't see in a race you didn't know you were running. That should be reassuring, but how do you know that flicker is really yours? Think about how often you act before you've consciously reflected on why. You instinctively catch a falling glass, or you brake when someone cuts in front of your car, or you finish someone else's sentence before realizing that you knew what they were going to say. Even outside of these split-second reactions, psychologists have repeatedly found that people readily construct explanations for their behavior after the fact, often believing those explanations with complete sincerity. The story we tell ourselves is coherent. It's logical, and it is deeply personal. But that doesn't necessarily make it the true cause of our actions. It may simply be the brain's way of making sense of decisions that have already emerged from countless unconscious processes. Consciousness, in this view, is less like a captain steering a ship and more like a press secretary, stepping up to the podium after the decision has already been made to explain why it was the only sensible course of action. If that's true, then even the veto, even that last flicker of no you just watched save someone from a machine's prediction, might not be an act of will at all. It might just be another story that your brain tells itself afterwards, dressed up to look like control. This idea was explored in depth by Harvard psychologist Daniel Wegner in his 2002 book, The Illusion of Conscious Will. Wegner argued that our experience of consciously willing an action and actually causing that action are not necessarily the same thing. Instead, the feeling of agency may itself be something the brain generates after unconscious processes have already set behavior in motion. We experience a thought immediately before an action and naturally conclude that the thought must have caused it, when in reality both the thought and the action may have arisen from deeper mechanisms operating beneath conscious awareness. Now, Wegner wasn't claiming that consciousness serves no purpose, nor that human beings are merely biological automatons. What he suggested was that our sense of being the conscious author of every decision is an inference, a compelling story the brain tells itself because it is the simplest explanation for what we experience. It's easier for our minds to justify that we have made a conscious decision than to have us acknowledge, on a regular basis, that we have no control over our actions. So here's the strange position we're left in. Maybe the veto is real. Maybe it isn't. Maybe the story your brain tells you about deciding is true. Or maybe it's just a press release written after the fact. We genuinely don't know. Neither did Laplace. Neither did Wegner. Neither, if we're honest, does Haynes. But notice something. Whether you side with determinism or free will, you still, on some level, choose things every day, at least in the conventional sense of the word. You still picked eggs over cereal this morning. You still clicked this video over the 1,000 other things competing for your attention. Call that choice an illusion if you want. Call it the last flicker of something real. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which one it is, because either way, it behaves like a choice. It can be observed, and it can be measured. But here's the problem. If it can be measured, it can be studied. And if it can be studied, it can be hijacked. You don't have to believe in free will to find that terrifying. You just have to look around and see what happens when someone else learns your patterns so well they can predict the choices you'll make with scary accuracy. And even worse, they can manipulate those choices to line their pockets. Let's test it, right now, on you. Here's a game. You've got two options and you stand to make some money. Option 1. You have a 100% chance of gaining $450. Wow. Option 2. A 50% chance of gaining $1,000. Which one do you pick? You can write it down in the comments to lock it in. Now, here's the second round. It's the same game, except this time you've got something to lose. Option 1. A 100% chance of losing $500, or option 2, a 50% chance of losing $1,100. And pick again. You can drop that in the comments and let me know what you picked. Here's what you probably chose. In the first round, you took the guaranteed $450 and walked away from the coin flip, even though the coin flip is worth more on average. But in the second round, you chose the coin toss, gambling on losing $1,100 rather than accepting a guaranteed $500 loss, even though that is the worst bet mathematically. If I got it right, then you have to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. If I didn't, let me know in the comments section which one I got wrong and what your thought process was for your decision. The truth is, those weren't really guesses on my part. They're what most people pick, reliably, according to prospect theory, developed by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Before Kahneman and Tversky, economists assumed people made decisions by calculating expected value, weighing every outcome by its probability and picking whatever number came out highest. Prospect theory proved that's not what we actually do. Instead, we measure everything against a reference point, usually wherever we currently stand, and we don't treat gains and losses as mirror images of each other. Losing $100 doesn't feel like the opposite of gaining $100. It hurts us, mentally, roughly twice as much. That single asymmetry, losses wounding harder than equivalent gains reward, is the foundation the entire theory is built on. And it does not stop there. Kahneman and Tversky found that we're also wired to favor whatever protects us right now over whatever benefits us later, a pattern they called myopic loss aversion. We will trade a better long-term outcome for a worse one simply because the worse one feels safer in this exact moment. This isn't a quirk that shows up in some people and not others. It isn't a personality trait or a fickle mood. It's closer to a default setting, wired in deep enough that it shows up the same way across all cultures, income levels, and decades of research. Which means, on some level, your reaction to gain and loss was never really a mystery. It's calculable. And like I said earlier, if it can be measured, it can be studied. And if it can be studied, it can be hijacked. This hijacking is exactly what modern tech companies have done to maximize shareholder value. The most egregious example is in social media algorithms. It didn't start this way. We were sold connection and discourse without borders. But somewhere along the way, these companies saw the dollar signs, and instantly we were all shoved into this multi-billion-dollar industry built entirely on our attention. And once your attention becomes the product being sold, your predictability stops being incidental. It becomes the entire business model. Here's how it works. An algorithm notices what keeps you watching, and it feeds you more of exactly that. It's not guessing. It's applying the same principle Kahneman and Tversky already proved about you, that your reactions are stable enough to model at a scale that you can't opt out of. And it is terrifyingly effective. Think about the last time you closed an app after an hour and felt like you've actually gained something. Now think about the last time you closed it feeling hollowed out, like you just spent an hour running in place. Scrolling doesn't feel like effort. It doesn't even feel like a decision. And that's by design. It's built to exploit the same bias you just watched at work in the coin toss. Our drive to avoid the small discomfort of the present moment, even when it costs us something much larger later. But here's the part that should actually worry you. The algorithm was never just watching you to understand you. It was watching you to shape you. There's a name for what's happening underneath all of this. Harvard professor Shoshana Zuboff calls it surveillance capitalism, an economic system where your private experiences, what you linger on, what you scroll past, what makes you pause, all of those become raw material, not to serve you better, but to predict you better, and eventually steer you better. And we hand this over willingly. Every account you've ever created came with a terms of service agreement that you almost certainly never read. You scrolled past the one document that might have told you exactly what you were giving away to get faster to the thing that was going to take it from you. Your ability to tolerate slow moments or to cultivate the habit of enduring short-term discomfort for long-term gain is being whittled down by these platforms that profit off of our attention. We always want big and loud and sensational, and we want that now. We want it over quickly so we can move on to the next big, loud, sensational thing. Our free will, our ability to choose, is being destroyed to serve corporate interests. Because if your patterns can be modeled, and your attention can be sold, and your scroll can be engineered, what exactly is left that is still yours? But there's another implication here that goes far beyond advertising. Suppose, for a moment, that the philosophers and the scientists that we've already discussed are even partially correct. Suppose our decisions are shaped wholly by subconscious processes, by our environment, by cognitive biases and predictable patterns of behavior long before we become consciously aware of making a choice. If that's true, then human beings are, at least to some degree, predictable. For centuries, that predictability was simply an interesting philosophical problem. Today, it has become an extraordinarily valuable commercial asset. The central idea behind this trend is surprisingly simple. Every time we interact with a digital platform, we leave behind a trail of behavioral data. Not just what we clicked, but how long we hesitated before clicking, how quickly we scrolled past it, which videos we finished and which we abandoned partway through, what time of day we're browsing, which notifications we ignore, and which ones immediately pull us back into an app. These tiny fragments of behavior are collected, analyzed, and transformed into increasingly accurate predictions about what we are likely to do next. Notice what's happened here. The philosophical question has quietly become an engineering problem. Companies don't need to settle the debate over free will. They don't need to know whether consciousness truly authors our decisions or merely narrates them after the fact. They only need to know that our behavior follows reliable patterns often enough to make accurate predictions. Every successful recommendation, every advertisement that you click, every notification that succeeds in bringing you back to an app is evidence that your future behavior was, to some extent, foreseeable. These systems aren't perfect, but they don't have to be. If an algorithm can predict your next decision even slightly better than chance, and it can make that prediction billions of times each day across billions of users, that small statistical advantage becomes worth billions and even trillions of dollars. This is why the modern internet is built around surveillance and observation. The more accurately a platform can model your behavior, the more effectively it can anticipate what will capture your attention. Your digital footprint becomes less a record of who you were and more of a forecast of who you're about to become. But this prediction is only the beginning. Imagine you discover that someone always takes the same route home from work. Predicting their journey is useful. You can set up your Smashburger joint along their usual route to hopefully capture their business. But you know what's even more valuable? Being able to convince them to take a different route where you have not one or two, but thousands of different stores, so they just have to stop at one. Surveillance capitalism follows the same logic. Once a system becomes sufficiently good at anticipating behavior, the next step is learning how to influence that behavior in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. A recommendation appears at exactly the right moment. A notification arrives just as your attention begins to drift elsewhere. A headline is written to exploit your curiosity. A video automatically begins before you've decided whether you want to watch another one. Individually, these are tiny nudges. None of them is forcing you to act. But together they shape the environment in which your decisions are made. This is what makes the discussion of free will so relevant today. If our decisions are already constrained by unconscious drives, cognitive biases, and deterministic processes, then changing the environment around those decisions changes the outcomes that we're likely to produce. The platform doesn't necessarily need to override your will. It only needs to arrange your choices so that one path feels easier, more familiar, or more rewarding in the moment than the alternatives. Convenience becomes the mechanism of influence. The result is that the same behavioral tendencies described by Kahneman, Tversky, Libet, and Haynes are no longer merely subjects of academic research. They become design principles. Every insight into how people actually make decisions can be incorporated into products whose success depends on capturing and directing human attention. In that sense, surveillance capitalism doesn't prove that free will is an illusion. It simply assumes that we are predictable enough for prediction to be profitable. And every year, those predictions become more accurate. So where does this leave all of us? Well, we've traveled from Laplace's vision of a perfectly deterministic universe to Spinoza's argument that our choices are simply links in an endless chain of cause and effect. We've looked at neuroscience, suggesting that our brains begin preparing actions before we become consciously aware of making them. We've seen psychologists demonstrate that our decisions are riddled with predictable biases. And finally, we've watched those same predictable behaviors become the foundation for one of the largest industries in human history. At every stage, the same uncomfortable idea has emerged. Perhaps we are far less in control than we like to believe. For centuries, that was merely a philosophical curiosity. It was something debated in lecture halls and written about in books. Whether free will existed or not didn't seem to change much about everyday life. If philosophers wanted to argue over determinism, let them. The rest of us still have jobs to go to, families to raise, and decisions to make. Today, though, the stakes have changed. Our growing understanding of human behavior is no longer confined to academia. It has become the raw material for products, platforms, and business models that compete for one thing above all else: our attention. If Laplace, Spinoza, Libet, Wegener, Kahneman, and Haynes are even partially right, if our behavior is influenced by unconscious processes, cognitive shortcuts, and predictable patterns, then those aren't merely fascinating discoveries about the human mind, they are opportunities. Every insight into how people actually make decisions can be incorporated into systems designed to predict and influence those decisions. The debate over free will has quietly left philosophy and entered product design. But I don't think this means that we're doomed. In fact, I think the opposite conclusion is a lot more useful. The mistake is that believing free will must either exist completely or not exist at all, as though we're either perfectly autonomous beings or helpless biological machines with no agency whatsoever. Reality is probably far less dramatic. Regardless of your stance, determinist or libertarian, the agency to make decisions for yourself, illusory as though they may be, is crucial to our experience. Even if free will is a convenient lie that we tell ourselves, we need to believe in the lie. Otherwise, those intangible things, good, evil, creativity, love, and passion, become meaningless. And if free will is real, if we truly are the architects of our own fate, then it's ever more imperative that we exercise that muscle, just as we would any other muscle. No one would argue that because some people are born stronger than others, strength doesn't matter. We understand instinctively that strength is something that can be developed or neglected, even if we might not all start from the same baseline. A person confined to bed for years loses muscle. An athlete who trains consistently gains it. The potential was always there, but it required effort to realize. And maybe agency works the same way. Even if every thought begins in unconscious process, consciousness still appears capable of reflecting on those thoughts after the fact. Even if our first impulse isn't freely chosen, we still have the ability to influence what happens next. We can pause. We can question our instincts. We can deliberately place ourselves in environments that encourage better decisions rather than worse ones. That may not be the absolute metaphysical free will that philosophers have argued over for centuries, but it is nevertheless something profoundly important. The systems surrounding us certainly seem to think so. If attention were meaningless, companies wouldn't spend billions trying to capture it. If habits couldn't be shaped, recommendation algorithms wouldn't exist. If environments didn't influence behavior, casinos wouldn't be designed without clocks. Supermarkets wouldn't place essentials at the back of the store. And social media platforms wouldn't endlessly refine every notification, every autoplay feature, and every recommendation to maximize retention. The architects of these systems have made a remarkable bet. They are betting that human behavior can be influenced. Every year that bet appears to pay off. In the novel Brave New World, Aldous Huxley proposed that the Orwellian dystopia of 1984 is less realistic than a world wherein we gave up our control willingly. In Huxley's dystopia, we aren't dragged out into the streets marching in lockstep under the eyes of Big Brother. In Huxley's world, we gave over our agency willingly. blinded by a world of easy pleasure, instant gratification, and ever-present availability of the path of least resistance. We gave away our free will one swipe at a time. I find his vision remarkably accurate. We are given a choice every moment of every day. Algorithms and social media aren't threatening us at gunpoint. They're simply making one choice easier than the other. One more video, one more notification, one more swipe. What could it hurt? And individually, these moments are trivial. Collectively, though, they become habit. Habit becomes routine. Routine becomes a lifestyle. Eventually, we wake up one day wondering where the last 5 years went, convinced that every decision along the way was entirely our own. Imagine your capacity for deliberate choice as a small flame. If that flame burns brightly, then outside influences matter less because they struggle to overpower it. But if that flame is already weak, distracted, exhausted, overwhelmed, and constantly reacting to whatever demands your attention next, then even a gentle breeze can determine which direction it moves. A mind that never experiences silence struggles to reflect. A person constantly interrupted rarely thinks deeply. Someone endlessly rewarded for seeking novelty finds it difficult to tolerate boredom. And boredom, ironically, may be one of the most important prerequisites for genuine freedom of thought. Some of humanity's greatest ideas emerge not from constant stimulation, but from long periods of uninterrupted reflection. Reading difficult books, walking without headphones, sitting with uncomfortable thoughts instead of immediately trying to escape them. These are increasingly rare experiences, yet they are precisely the moments in which we examine our beliefs instead of merely reacting to them. The philosopher William James once wrote that our life is the sum of our habits. Modern technology has learned the same lesson. It competes relentlessly to shape those habits, because habits are remarkably stable predictors of future behavior. If we wish to preserve whatever agency we possess, then we must become equally intentional about protecting them. And that means creating spaces where algorithms can't follow us, practicing sustained attention in a world optimized for distraction, choosing difficulty when convenience would quietly make the decision for us, learning to be bored again, learning to think before reacting, learning to ask every now and then, not just what do I want to do, but why do I want to do it? Free will never free you from cause and effect. It's not an escape from your biology, and it may not even be real. But if we forsake it, there will always be others who are all too eager to bend it towards their own goals. And if it is fragile, then preserving our independence begins with protecting our attention. There's an African proverb I heard once that I love, and it says, "Who the gods want to kill, they first make mad." And it simply means that before you are completely wiped out, the powers that be first take your ability to think critically for yourself. That's why before they came for our free will, they first came for our collective critical thinking skills. Ignore whatever the algorithm is trying to feed you and make the decision to click the video on screen right now to watch our documentary on the death of critical thinking and how stupidity took over.